we were not paying attention to our numbers at all. And it was an absolute disaster. And it was snowballing in the wrong direction. And it forced us eventually to take over 2 years of our life to dig out of just to get to zero, to get to baseline zero, and a lot of hard work. So I think it probably goes without saying from my story, I'm a very, very big proponent of looking at your numbers and knowing data, and it it tells a story. And I think one of the roles as a business owner is to understand the story that the numbers in your business is telling you.
Hey you, I'm Mark, husband of one, father of three, maker of puns, climber of trees, grower of businesses, pitcher of tents, occasional cutter of cheese, word nerd, and lover of families. Oh no. Oh no, not yet. No. Here he comes. Where's my oar? Showed that Kraken who's boss. At least until like 2 p.m. this afternoon. I think I'll be due for another attack by then. Let's jump into it. Hey, welcome to all you bandits and chilies. Today's episode explores debt and navigating financial hardship within the family whilst utilising the business as the tool to get back in the green. John Karmazyn, or as I used to refer to him as, John with the last name, you know the one, has not only a story of $163,000 of debt plus a mortgage, but also is now running a multi-million-dollar business. It's a pleasure to have you on. How the heck are you, John Karmazyn?
Mark, it's great. This is I never knew you referenced me that way, so that's the first time hearing that, and I don't blame you. It's completely acceptable.
Yeah, look, I actually did, just in the sense that people would be like, "Oh, who is that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, John, yeah." Like I think it starts with a K. Yeah, how have you been going? How is the new year treating you so far?
Great. I mean, it's exciting. It's an exciting time of year. Everybody's looking for turn the page and kind of fix all the things they wish they would have done in the prior year. So it's a good time for reflection, and it's an exciting time. So I'm definitely looking forward to the new year.
Yeah, awesome. So, give us a bit of an introduction into who you are, background in your family, your business, what you're doing. Just a bit of the context of now, bit of the context of your story, just for those who don't know you.
Sure. So I currently own a exterior cleaning company. Predominantly, we do pressure washing and gutter cleanings in the eastern Pennsylvania area, so kind of the northeast area of the U.S. And we also have a division where we hang holiday Christmas lights during the colder months of the season. So that's kind of how I operate business wise now. Family, been married. Actually, 2025 is going to be 20 years. Um, and we have two children, two daughters. They are currently 14 and 16. And yeah, I mean, prior to starting the exterior cleaning company, I was in the construction space, and I was a project manager for a commercial construction company. And I always say, looking back on that, it was a family run business that was transitioning into its third generation, which is very, very rare, especially for a company of this size. They were doing on average, I'd say on average, their average year, they would do about $200 million in revenue. And to be a part of it, they had roughly 300 employees. And, to be a part of that right out of college, as going from an intern in college to full time work there, seeing how they ran a business, treated their employees, and treated their vendors and their subcontractors that they worked with. That really, I think, sort of subconsciously built my a good foundation for me to see this is how a successful business should be run. And obviously at the time I had no idea I was going to eventually leave and start my own company, but so I'm very thankful for that company and the time I had there. I still love the construction world. Like I feel like it's in my blood. Anytime I have the opportunity to go out and like build something or be a part of, walk around on a construction site, like I get excited because I don't know, it's something that's ingrained in me. I love it. Um,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, so that's a little bit about how I got to where we are today and what my family looks like.
Yeah. Awesome. So, what specifically from that the way that that company treated people? You mentioned like the team, clients, vendors. What specifically was really good about the way that they handled that?
I they Integrity was a very very important piece of their just fabric of the company, and um, there was a lot of money changing hands. There was lots of contracts that had loopholes in them and this and that, and they had times where they probably could have gotten out of a sticky situation because of some loophole in a contract, but when they know they actually screwed up, they owned up to it. And if it cost
Mm,
them hundreds of thousands of dollars, they stuck to their integrity because that was more important than the money. And I was part of a couple scenarios where they had to go back and redo some work that really probably wasn't their fault. They installed it as the manufacturer
mm,
suggested and the architect specified and the whole nine yards, but something failed along the way and they had to go back and do it. And it literally cost them several $100,000 to
mm,
do this. And but they said, you know what, it's the right thing to do, and they did it. And that specific scenario was really like where the rubber meets the road. It's like, are you going to back up what
mm.
your talk is? And the
Yeah.
answer to that was definitely yes. And just the way they treated the employees, they truly cared and appreciated everyone on their team. Um, the owner would definitely he'd stop by, make time to talk with everybody when he had the opportunity. Obviously, with 2 to 300 people in the company, it's difficult to get to talk to everybody. But I would see anytime he was walking around, if he would visit a job site, he would stop and talk to every employee at least for 2-3 minutes just to have a conversation with them. So those types of things,
Mm,
just humble, you know integrity is
yeah.
really, I
That
think,
that would
true.
that would really bleed through into all aspects of like the culture, because like what you're saying, everyone would feel that, they would see that, they would know, and it, it kind of it kind of makes me think about like the word integrity itself. um, it doesn't have a number on it, but sometimes people feel like it does.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
um, I think Jim Rohn used to talk about like if you like I think his thing was about like essentially giving away 10% of your income, and that if you do that when starting when the amounts are small, then you can be trusted to do that when the amounts are larger. People say, "Oh, if I had $1 million, I'd give away $100,000." He's like, "Yeah, I'm not so sure that you would."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's fascinating to see that, because I think a lot of people can, when the amounts are a lot smaller, they can kind of nickel and dime those situations and um, look for ways to wriggle out of something that maybe it's just like, this is just one of those times where you should you should take it on the chin, or you should do the extra thing, or whatever it is to make that work. Um, so after you finished up with them, well, maybe not so much after, but like the story of you finishing up with them and then starting your business, the transition to that, and in amongst all of that, getting into the debt side of your story. Can you bridge the gap for us for that timeline?
So the transition from the construction company to our own business was um, started in 2012, and we it was after the 2008 um, sort of mortgage crumbling here in the states, and lots of in the construction world, a lot of the home builders and the contractors in the residential space fled to the commercial world because there was still work going on there. So that made it really challenging for us in the commercial space because all the work that we did with that company was what's called hard bid. So it was government contracts. So we had to bid everything out, and it was straight up lowest bidder. There was no other like qualifiers
Yeah.
to get the projects. It was straight up lowest bid, get wins the job. So we were seeing um, these residential guys coming in, not understanding how the commercial contracting works for these types of projects, and they were just really underbidding and like missing tons of things on these projects that they should have accounted for. And we ended up like 2010 2011 where we had a couple jobs projects going with some of these contractors, and we're two-thirds of the way through the project, and they would literally come to us and say, I screwed up. I can't finish this job. I don't have any money left. And like we were
Mm,
predominantly, we would build schools. So
mm,
schools start in August, and they came to us, early July and was like, yeah, I can't finish this. And it's like, oh, now what do we do? So that was just like a glimpse of what I was dealing with. And I really started to dislike my job. I loved
mm,
the company still, but the job itself was just exhausting because I had to negotiate contracts all day long. And all I wanted to do was build buildings. And I felt more of an
yeah.
attorney. And, I felt like I needed to go back to school to get a law degree to like be successful every day.
You weren't feeling that excitement of stepping on the construction side and walking around and swinging a hammer anymore. It was
Yeah.
like, yeah.
It's like, who's going to flake out on us today? And how bad is that going to mess things up? So that was going on probably for, a good year and a half. And I thought, all right, maybe this will pass. And it never really did. So I think I've always had an entrepreneurial, um, I guess, bend. And like in college, I would I'd like make these things on the side and sell them and different stuff like that. Like I always had little side hustles going on. So at one point, my sort of breaking point story is we were going to the beach, and my wife was going to run her first half marathon. Um, and it was, I want to say it was like the second week of August. And I left early on a Friday to go so we can travel down to the beach and prepare, so she could run the race on Sunday morning. And I got a phone call when we were probably 30 minutes away from the destination at the beach. And it was the elevator, the lift company was, we needed them on the job site so we can get the certificate so we could get the school to open.
Mm,
We couldn't get the certificate without this slip for
mm,
the elevator. And my guy on site called me and said they were supposed to be here 2 hours ago and they still haven't shown up yet. Have you heard anything? I said, nope. Last I heard, they were there. So I am on the phone trying to sort all this out, and we pull into the hotel that we were staying at, and I get out of the car and I'm just on the phone, just trying to, again, going back to this negotiating,
Mm.
trying, just begging, pleading to get people there to show up. And I remember looking back at one point, and my wife was schlepping the two kids from the car with all the bags and the luggage, all the stuff, because our kids were young at that time, and
Yeah.
I think I want to say they were 2 and 4 maybe, and
Mm.
so she's carrying all the pack and play and the cribs and all that stuff that you have to do when you're traveling with young ones, and she
Yeah,
just looked
I
at me.
totally know. I do that all the time. I just pretend I'm on the phone when we arrive at the destination. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know what you mean.
but but I can still remember looking at her and just the look in her eyes of like, don't let me do this alone. Like, I need your help. So, but I felt so in a rock and a hard place sort of situation here, because I couldn't let the school not open
Mm.
because of this. I had to help, like, it all that pressure fell on me. And then the pressure of
Yeah.
being a good husband and father was like crumbling on me. I felt so broken in that moment, and I didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And but I knew I had to do something different than, like, I couldn't continue this on. I needed a change. So
So what was the outcome of that event? Like, did you have to like pack everything back in the car and physically leave,
no, so we
or
stayed. We stayed.
yeah,
I was able to finally get it sorted out, and another hour later, and another 15 phone calls, but we got it sorted out enough that we could set that aside. We enjoyed the weekend there. My wife was able to run the race, but in between that phone call and her running the race,
Mhm.
there was a thunderstorm of epic proportions that parked itself over our hotel the night before the race. And we were up probably all night. I think
Mhm.
my wife probably got 2 hours of sleep before she was going
Mm.
to run a half marathon, which is not
Yeah.
not great, especially if it's your first half marathon. Like,
Mm.
so, but in that time, like, after going through that experience and kind of having that breaking moment of like, I need to do something else, I was literally just sitting up during the storm, and like, to talk about a brainstorm moment, like, literally there's a storm outside, like, the symbolic significance of that. And I was just took a notepad and just started writing ideas out, like, what can I do?
Mm. Mm.
And it sort of, the iteration eventually got us into the pressure washing world. And a few it was about a month and a half after that, um, a guy that I worked with at the construction company had an old pressure washer in his shed that he couldn't get working. And he said, "Oh, I know you like to tinker with things and like tweak on engines and stuff." He's like, "If you can get that thing running," he's like, "you can have it. Otherwise, I'm just going to throw it away." I said, "Okay, cool. I need to pressure wash my deck, so that'll work out good." I needed to pressure wash my deck in preparation for this side hustle that I was planning on. And so I got the pressure washer, went on YouTube, kind of figured out what I needed to do, got it up and running. And at first I power washed the side of our house and got all that nasty green mildew and algae off of it. And I was like, "Oh, that was satisfying, and it looks really good." So then I started tackling the deck, and a little over halfway through the deck, the machine starts smoking and spitting water everywhere, and it was toast. Like, that was it.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, "All right, well, I guess I got to go find a way to finish this." So I went inside and jumped on Craigslist and started searching just for a cheap used um, pressure washer, because we didn't have a ton of money. We were in debt at that point already, so I didn't have a whole lot of cash laying around. So I'm like, I'm not going out to buy a new one. I'm going to find a cheap one, and just to get me through. And as I'm scrolling through Craigslist, I find a listing that said commercial pressure washer for sale. Will train you to start your own pressure washing company. And that was sort of the light bulb for me. Like, wait a second. I had a good time. Like, that was enjoyable out there. there's people that actually do this and you can make money like
Mm.
as a legitimate business. It wasn't even on my radar. I never saw any
Mm.
pressure washing companies prior to that. I thought it was just a random service that like a handyman would do. So I called the guy up and had some conversations with him, went out and visited him. He showed me his truck and all that. I asked him why he was selling. He was relocating and he was building a new setup. So he just wanted to get rid of this one. And training me was fine because he was moving. So I wasn't going to be a competition or threat to him. And um, so after that meeting, I went back home and I've been talking to my wife about this the whole time. So it's not like I came home and was like, hey, honey, we're going to buy a pressure washing truck and start a business. So, um, but we put together a business plan and we got a uh, small business loan through the SBA here in the States. And it was for $36,000 to get started. And that bought the truck, the equipment, and gave us some money to like build a website and have some marketing money to do a little bit of marketing and stuff like that. So it wasn't crazy, but it was enough that kind of we could get started with it. So come October of that year, so just what 2.5 months after that situation that we ran in at the beach, I bought the truck from that guy. We officially launched our company. I had a website up and running, and we were in business. But I knew we were coming into the winter months, so I was doing it as a side hustle with the anticipation of it growing and eventually going. But I kept it as a side hustle. So for um, it was 10 months from the time that we started it till carried me through the winter. I was still at the construction company then. And then it was August of the following year of 2013 when the guy that gave me the pressure washer came in my office and said, well, I think we've been transitioning you out. I think we have all your projects covered. So next Friday's going to be your last day. Does that sound good? And I looked at him and I was like, sure. So like I was comfy, right? Like I was making extra money on the
Yeah.
side. I had my nice job that had our insurance and retirement and all that stuff. And to have
In hindsight, you just needed a little
say like,
push, but maybe at the time it felt like a little bit of a shove.
yes, exactly. It was 100% a shove, but it was exactly what I needed at the time. And
Yeah.
we were having my daughter's birthday party that afternoon, so I left the office and went to the birthday party and told my wife what AJ said to me, and she looked at me and she goes, "Okay, we're doing this," and
Yeah.
that was it. So we officially launched
Mm.
full time in August of 2013.
Awesome. So you mentioned in that story that you're already starting to enter the realms of debt. Um, what what habits or patterns can you identify that led you into deep debt?
So I think there's a couple things looking back on it. One was we just it has to do with contentment and being content with what we had at the time, and our income level and all that. Like we were trying to live like we were multimillionaires when we were far from. So
Mm.
we would spend, and much of it was on credit cards. And the thought was always, oh, we'll take care of it later. We'll
Mm.
we'll kick the can down the curb. So all the credit cards would have these balance transfer offers where you could move the balance over and it would be 0% for a year. And we
Mm.
would do that and we'd be like, okay, we've got another year now. We can take care of that. but we never would. We'd move it over
Mm.
there, and then we would just end up accumulating more somewhere else.
Mm.
So it just really snowballed on us over time. But if I really had to, distill it down, I think to two things, it would be a lack of contentment on our part and just really looking at it as, oh, that's future John's problem.
Yeah.
Future John he'll sort that out later. Like things will work out
Yeah.
in a couple months and we'll be able to pay all this off. And it was like we were complete fools to really think that because we had no like lever to pull to really, make a ton of money
Yeah.
in a short amount of time to take care of it. So
But you didn't have to do that. That was a future John
that's
problem.
right. Exactly.
I don't know if you've seen that meme. There's a meme that's like, your future self is talking smack about you, right? And then it's like, oh, that's fine. I'm going to ruin that guy's life.
It's so true though. Like there's certain times where we joke about it now, but it's like, oh yeah, that's future John's problem.
Yeah, but yeah, it wasn't so funny for future John.
Yeah.
Um, and then so I guess from that, I've always found this like an interesting thing that the way that money you can kind of track it on paper to a point, but then it doesn't always make sense. Like if you're in debt, you can look at the numbers on paper, and then when you've actually looked at that, go, well, then how does that make sense? That how are we in debt, but we're still paying our bills, we're still that kind of thing. So it's sort of the money can stretch until it snaps. What are your thoughts on why people may not realize straight away that they are even in debt, or like the severity of the situation?
It's a good point. I think in our scenario, it was mounting month after month, and we got to the point where the home that we were in, we were depleting our savings account, and it just became apparent one month. We looked and we're like, we don't have enough money to pay our mortgage next month with all the bills that we had. So like I think it was I don't know that we were aware. I mean, we were just completely
Mm.
it's just off the rails with our spending and our like we barely even like looked at the numbers. It was just we did the whole bank account accounting where it's like how much is in our account and that was it. Like
Mm.
balancing checkbooks, we do it occasionally, but it was like way too late in the process and we were just really really sloppy with managing money is really what it
Mm.
came down to. And um I think there gets to be that point where it's you have to get slapped in the face or one way or the other, whether it's you can't pay your mortgage, you can't buy food at the grocery store, like whatever that scenario is for somebody. um, but it's got to get, I think it has to be bad enough for you to, or for the person to want to change. Because for
Mm.
us, we were going along for months and it never was bad enough until we realized like we might lose our home. Like, whoa,
Mm.
we really screwed up here. Now we have to do something. Um,
So what was that? What was that moment like? Did that kind of was that a sort of an all at once moment where you mentioned you looked at the accounts and realized you didn't have enough money to pay the mortgage next month, and was it kind of the next half an hour from that realization was the moment of like just having the conversation and figuring out like, hey, actually we don't have a lot of options at our disposal right now? Was that all at once, or was it kind of a staggered um,
so
realization, I guess?
yeah, you would think it would kind of all happen at once, but it was a okay. How do we fix this problem right now, and at least make it so we still have a roof over our head and we're not homeless? So, of course, my irrational thoughts go immediately to the bank's going to come and we're just going to have to be living under a bridge somewhere. And obviously, that's not what we wanted. So we had to figure something out. But it was what it really took for us. From that point, we moved. We ended up short selling the house. So the bank like assisted in. So it's not quite a foreclosure. It's like the step before a foreclosure. Um, we were able, praise the Lord, we were able to get out of that house like completely unscathed, and it was a very quick process once we sort of moved forward and went to the bank and said, hey, we can't afford this anymore. That whole process, which normally takes months, took like 45 days. So we were able to get out, but from that point we ended up moving into, I think, 6 different rentals. We lived with my parents for a few like a month. It was 2 3 months, I don't know. I sure if you ask my wife she would know exactly how many days we were there. but,
Yeah.
um, but we ended up jumping around quite a bit, and then finally we were able to purchase a home. Like we had
Mm.
enough, we had the business long enough, we were far enough away from our short sale, and we had enough sort of track record with the business and from the financial side that we could qualify for a mortgage again. So,
Mm.
and it's crazy to think it was 3 years after we did the short sale until we finally realized, actually it was probably 3.5 years until we finally realized we have a debt problem that we need to address. Like we knew we had it when we had to short sell the house, but we kind of chalked it up at the time to just, oh, we were just stupid and bought a house that we really couldn't afford, because that's
Mm.
what happened in 2008. So many
It
people.
was the house's fault.
Exactly, it was the house's fault, it wasn't our fault.
Yeah.
So
Really, I'm really glad we got away from that house. That was a bad house.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we liked the house, but it really wasn't good for us in the end. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it was just this false guided, just blame, I suppose, on like where the issue really was growing, and we just needed to look in the mirror. Like, nope, it's
Mm.
you guys because you keep spending, and you know, for a couple months, we were in a place that we didn't have to pay a mortgage or any rent. And you would
Yeah.
have thought, oh, great. You guys probably saved a bunch of money and was able to pay some debt down. Nope, we were stupid. We're like, hey, we got all this extra money. What are we going to do? Like, so it was just really, really poor choices stacked on top of each other. Um,
I feel like this is such a valuable conversation because obviously, now you can talk completely openly about it. We can laugh at little points along the way, but at the time, it's not at all like that. And I think a lot of people, whether they are in the situation to the same degree as that or not, the financial struggles, financial hardships are something that people don't really like to talk about, and they don't like to admit it even to themselves, let alone to someone else to try and get help with it or whatever. Um, and so it's it's really yeah, I think it's just really valuable to have that experience, like the story that you've now got and can share with other people, um, to kind of carry that conversation in someone else's mind that might be able to, yeah, help them out a little bit with that. Um, so then, so three and a half years after that initial thing, you've started to realize that you're, needing to look in the mirror for the source of the problem. What was that moment like? Because I guess the other side of it is just the effect. Money is, it's just a thing, but then it affects all the other things
mm,
and the effect that has on the family. And so you as a couple, um, were you both on the same page at the same time about where the blame lied and what the problem was? How did that develop? Was it like John showed up late to the party and he started looking in the mirror, and Michelle's like, "Oh yeah, no, I've been looking there for a while." Like, I don't know. Like, how did that go?
It was actually the opposite. So I was realizing that we had some issues, and it was a heavy weight that I was feeling more and more. And unfortunately, Michelle just wasn't there yet. And
Mm,
I don't know why or how, but I never really pressed her to be like, we need to do this, because I just had this like gut feeling that if I forced it on her, she might do it, but she wouldn't be all in on it until
mm,
it was like she owned that idea. And
yeah.
what the catalyst was, I think, was over the winter months early in our business, when we still really didn't have much income. During those months, I would go over to a friend's house and help him, just do some odd jobs and stuff. And he would listen to the Dave Ramsey podcast. And I'd never heard it before. And I thought, this is interesting. These people sound a lot like me that are calling in. And a lot of
Mm,
these people actually have a lot less debt than I do, and they sound completely helpless. I'm like thinking in my mind, like, you have no idea. Like, you got it good, right? So
yeah.
so that was kind of a tipping point for me. I started listening more and more to his podcast. And at one point, Michelle started listening to it. I didn't realize it. She would kind of listen to it on her own. And she came home the one day. I can still picture it. I was sitting in our basement at my little office desk that I had set up in the basement. And she came up next to me and she said, "We need to do something about the debt." She said, "I think we should look into doing the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace course, and just tackle this the right way." And I was looked up at her and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's finally happened. Like, yes, let's do this."
Mm,
So, um, so we looked into that and tried to find a, um, the Financial Peace University course that was nearby us and worked for our schedule. And there really wasn't one. So we called them up and they said, "Well, you guys can run your own at your church." And we're like, "No, you don't want us doing this. Like, we are like the worst example." And they're like, "No, you're the perfect example, because you running the class, needing to go through it, there's no better accountability than you standing
mm,
up in front of the class and knowing that you have to do the stuff that's in there, because you're saying, 'Hey, this is what we need to do this week.'" So,
mm,
um, so at that point, we were like, "Huh, okay, yeah, let's do it." So we led a class at our church, in March of 2015 or 16, and um, that was the start. We figured out what we needed to do. We figured out how bad it really was, um, and we just put our heads down and started just chipping away at. Dave Ramsey calls it the debt snowball, and we started to feel some momentum. And we would start paying off some stuff that we've been carrying and doing that balance transfer nonsense for years. Started finally paying some things off, and we'd get a little bit more momentum and a little bit more momentum. And before we knew it, it took us, I want to say, I think it was 29 months, 27 months. It was just over 2 years. And we looked up and it was like, holy smokes, we just, we cleared all of that. Like, it was
mm,
incredible. And I could still picture the feeling that we had when we paid off that last balance, was just like, this is surreal. Like, we don't owe anybody except for our mortgage at this point, which was something that we've never experienced during our marriage.
Mm. Yeah. So, so in that moment, and then reflecting on the journey, uh, obviously, I think there's validity to what you were saying about how if your wife hadn't come to that conclusion herself, she may not have owned it the same way, right? So I guess the fear would be then you'd get to that moment, but then the underlying mindset might not have changed enough, and you might find yourself there again, right? Or not be rowing in the same direction.
Right.
What what do you see as being the biggest difference in your approach as a couple to your finances after that experience compared to before?
Communication really
Mm,
was the biggest thing. Um, Open transparency and communication. We Prior to that, it was always she handled the money and just kind of told me if we were good or not. And
yeah.
that it's not, oh, it was her fault because she was handling the money. It was, no, I was just as much to blame because I was too lazy and I wasn't a good husband and step in and be like, hey, this is a lot for you to carry to manage all the finances for our entire household and raise our two children and take care of the house. Like, it was a jerky move on my part as a husband to looking back on it, right? In the time, I didn't think about this then,
Yeah.
but looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty stupid of you to just put that all on her. Like, that's a heavy weight for her to carry, especially when things aren't going well and
Mm,
it's a mess like
mm,
it was. So, um, I think the big thing for us during that process though was we got our children involved, so they understood what we were doing because during that 27, 29 months, we had to say no to a lot of things and
yeah.
we had to change from what they were used to. Like
Mm,
we would go out to restaurants and grab, Chick-fil-A and quick serve meals all the time.
mm,
And we had to put an end to that because that's where a lot of our money was being spent, bleeding out, was just going out to eat. And
mm,
um, the biggest the biggest thing that I remember during that process was we had the kids make a chain out of construction paper, and
mm.
they cut all these little links and they'd staple them together, and each link of the chain represented $1,000 of debt that we had. And
Mm,
they put 163 of these chains together, and they'd strung it, across the corners of the sunroom that we had at the house. And I remember looking out at the first time and just the visual of how long that chain was, one,
mm,
and two, just like the representation of like the burden I felt of having that much and it being a chain was like, oh gosh, like
mm,
it made me just want to absolutely annihilate the debt and get out of it so fast. But every time we paid off $1,000, one of the kids would get to cut one of the links off the chain. And like we made it it was a thing then. Like the kids would get
mm.
excited and they would be
The
like,
ceremony.
when can we cut another link? When can we cut another link? And like there'd be times where we would be doing really well and we could cut two links in a week. And it was like, whoa, we each get one this week? Yeah. All right, let's go. So that getting them involved in that so they know, like they felt it too and they
Mm,
understood why we were doing it. I
mm,
think that was really important because having children as business owners, like they see a lot of what's going on, but they don't necessarily always understand it. And sometimes we are, as parents and business owners, are going 100 miles an hour to keep everything afloat, juggling spinning all the plates and doing all the things that we do. it's hard for us to really stop and fully explain to our children what we're doing and why we're doing it. So
Yeah.
I think that gave us a really good opportunity to stop and sort of slow down and explain the process to our children. And I really hope and pray that that process helps them in their future as they grow up to be adults to avoid the stupid mistakes that we've made.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like the world's heaviest paper chain.
Yes. Yeah.
So in getting um, out of the debt, right? So you've gone from $163,000 in debt, and then you're paying that off, utilizing your business as the tool to do that. Um, and then now, obviously, you know that business you're running is a multi-million dollar operation. What were some pivotal moments in your business that you now look back on and see that they really underpinned the success of what it is now, what it's currently become?
I think it would probably be when when we started bringing on more people into the business to kind of get me out of the day to day, like having to do all the things. Um, During the time when we were going through the paying off the debt, we had, when we first started that journey, it was me and one, maybe two other employees. And I was wearing all the hats, out in the field doing all the work, doing the sales, scheduling, collecting payments, and all that stuff. And um, through that process, I've met some people, and without going down a whole nother rabbit trail, um, got around some really good mentors that really helped accelerate our business journey and encouraged me to bring some people on. One being an office person, an operations manager, and a salesperson. So those were like the three big hires that we made in the business, and they all happened within 90 days of each other.
Mm,
Um, and that season where we brought all three of those employees on, that just completely changed everything. I
mm,
was able to onboard them, but the amount of work that we were able to complete, because I wasn't the bottleneck anymore, because I multiplied myself times three essentially in that
mm.
regard. It really really opened up the floodgates and allowed us to do a whole lot more work and do it way more productively. And it lowered my stress level down too. So you hear sometimes people say, "Oh yeah, you bring on employees and they're just headaches." Well, yeah, they come with their challenges at times, but they also expand your capacity to do way way more and have a much larger impact. So that was, I think that was probably the catalyst for us um, in just being able to multiply our efforts.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned about like the bottleneck being the bottleneck in your business at that point and fixing that. I wanted to circle back to the elevator certificate call because that really feels like a lot of the same thing. It's just that happened to not be your business, but that feeling I think would resonate with a lot of small business owners that uh, you're trying to do a different thing, and all of this stuff is coming up. And when you boil that story down, right, it's literally it's a piece of paper, and what do you have to do to get the piece of paper? This particular person from representing this company has to show up and sign off on one thing, but the meaning, the weight of everything else on it is like as heavy as the school
Right. Yeah.
because the whole thing isn't going to all the other work that's led up to that is not going to be completed on time essentially because of that one thing. And that that's what it's like for um, so many people in their own business, and it sounds like that's kind of, you would have felt echoes of that entering into your life at that point before those three hires, where the solution that you'd use to get out of the debt problem with your business, like that was the tool that you'd use to generate the money to get out of it relatively quickly. But then at the same time, it's starting to take on that kraken like shape of being that thing that caused you to leave your previous job.
Right.
So, did you have moments along the journey where you really felt that pressure of like, if I just had a red button that I could smash and disintegrate this business and sell all its assets instantaneously, I would hit that and then I would move on because right now everyone is calling me about this or that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and that still happens occasionally to this day. Like that's
Yeah.
not a feeling I think that really ever fully goes away.
Mm.
And just a side note, I a friend of mine had the opportunity. He's friends with a few billionaires and runs a the one guy runs a multi-billion-dollar marketing company, and he asked him a question a couple weeks ago, like, what keeps you up at night? And there was some banter amongst, us there. Like, oh yeah, he's probably going to say like nothing. Like he'll laugh at you. Like, ah, nothing keeps me up. I'm fine. Like we're good now. But he
Mm.
said that it's there's a lot of stuff that keeps him up at night because everything just gets bigger. The problems get bigger as the company gets bigger. He's dealing with lawsuits and like I was explaining, feeling like an attorney now. Like he's the CEO of this massive billion-dollar organization. And he's having to deal with lawsuits and all these crazy things where he would rather actually go back and deal with
Mm.
the smaller problems, which at the time, as you're growing,
Yeah.
feel insurmountable. But it comes with growth. It comes with growth.
Yeah, that's it. I guess the there's so many things to that. One is that the challenges that are a challenge to you um, are not a challenge to someone who is ahead of that point, right? So
Right.
um, he's like anyone, he's looking back at a previous level and saying, well, if I now, having graduated to this level, was at that level, this would be really easy.
Yep.
That'd be great. But then on the other hand, it's like the other thing that's made me think of is just that you can put people in place to gatekeep things, to on a small business level to handle the admin, the phone calls, the emails, and whatever. And then like you were saying, you got an operations manager, you got someone doing like the finance, great. But then with all of those layers, the things that do get past them, the things that do escalate to you are now inherently bigger, right? It's just the biggest
Yeah.
problems that are coming your way. And then that's
Yep.
just magnified in that example where it's like, yeah, the things that escalate to his level are the lawsuits and um, yeah. So it's hectic. A new devil at every level.
Yeah. Yeah.
How attentive do you think that someone needs to be to the numbers in their business to ensure success?
I think it's you can get to a certain level by ignoring it, um, especially if you're good at selling. If you're good at selling, like sales masks a lot of
Mm.
inadequacies in your business. I think that probably goes without saying. But um, you tie back to our personal story of our debt. Like we were not paying attention to our numbers at all. And it was an
Mm.
absolute disaster. And it was snowballing in the wrong direction. And it forced us eventually to take over 2 years of our life to dig out of just to get to zero, to get to
Mm.
baseline zero, and a lot of hard work. So I think it probably goes without saying from my story, I'm a very, very big proponent of looking at your numbers and knowing data, and it it tells a story. And I think one of the roles as a business owner is to understand the story that the numbers in your business is telling you. And it's not easy because every business is different, and most people operate slight variances, unless obviously you're running a franchise. But I think even in that, like I have three friends that all own franchise businesses, and they're all different, like from location to location. Like, yes, there's baseline stuff that they all manage and is similar, but within, if you look at location to
Mm.
location, there's differences. So you can't just package it up and say, yep, I'm looking at numbers and these are the numbers that you need to look at and understand. And this is what, as long as you're above this threshold, your business is healthy. Like, it's different. So as the business owner, you need to understand that. And if you don't inherently know that, you need to, I highly recommend partnering up with people who are really good at that, and they can
Mm.
decode and demystify what what those numbers are telling
Mm.
you, so they can help you make better decisions. So, our business, we've had a few, we have a bookkeeper that helps keep our books clean. I hired a fractional CFO. So I meet with them once a month, and he goes through our books and helps us project out for the year to see where things are. Like, it's big, higher level planning rather than just day to day stuff. But that's the type of stuff that, he can really look back and say, what happened this quarter? Because things just look off. And
Mm.
you may have felt it during that quarter, like, yeah, something just wasn't right, but I can't put my finger on it. But looking at the data, having somebody be able to point that out and work through that with you, I think it's absolutely crucial for your business at any stage, but especially as you start growing and getting past, the $1 million, $2 million mark. Having somebody in your corner that can really help you understand what the numbers are telling you in your business is going to help you.
Yeah, I think, as you've said, the numbers tell a story, and then to the degree of your financial literacy, you can read that story. And so, I'm just thinking of, like, if you read like some Shakespeare or something, you might be able to catch the gist of it. But if you're really an expert in that older English, you're going to get like the full flavor and the message behind it, and a lot more nuance. So even to the degree that you can, yourself still seeking outside advice for that is going to be really beneficial, because someone else is going to, and as well, not only are they potentially going to be better at reading that story, but they're also going to be more objective, because they're not a character in the story. That's a big difference as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's a good point.
I have a vested interest in what I want this story to say, and so I'm approaching it from that lens initially.
Yeah.
Um, what so it's a new year. What are your goals for 2025, both personal and business? What's in store for you, John?
Um, we are really taking a look at our customer journey as a big part for the business this year. Um, I think there's been a big push more specifically in the last year, probably the last 6 months, on AI, and like this huge wave of AI, and how can we utilize that in our businesses. And I think it's a great tool. And I don't want to sound like, an old guy and be like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. But I think there's a balance point there where you can utilize it for certain tasks that optimize your business. But I think there's a danger of going too far and leveraging or leaning on it too much, and losing that personal touch that people ultimately are still looking for at some level through the journey. Um,
Mm,
so we definitely are looking at that and making sure that we're not just leaning too much on automations and all this stuff, and we have still a personal touch within our process that we can talk to a customer. The customer can call in and talk to a person, like, and not it's not
mm,
just all automated chats. And because I mean, I think most of us would agree if you've ever worked with Amazon or one of those large corporations and you need to get through to somebody, you have a problem that you literally can solve with a 4 minute like conversation with a human being, but it takes you 20 minutes to get through their stupid chat bots and all these
mm,
other things to like get to a person. It's frustrating. And
mm,
I don't, as a small business, like I think there's this desire to feel bigger than you and appear bigger than you really are. But I think really sometimes, and I would say a lot of times, people hire small businesses because they like that there's humans in their small businesses. So I think
mm,
there's this dichotomy that we have to battle against of like, how big do we really make ourselves feel and look versus losing that touch that our customers are really looking for. So
yeah,
we're definitely doing a deep dive in that. Um, I think one of the things that we're also exploring is setting ourselves up for a potential future exit. There's a lot of private equity talk the last couple years here, and that wave is still out there. So we want to make sure that our business is set up appropriately. That if
mhm,
an opportunity would come about, that somebody would come in and want to buy us, and we could expand and grow faster, then I definitely want to be poised to be able to take that opportunity.
mm. Awesome. Um, so just as a sort of tying the end back to the beginning, if you had 1 minute to speak wisdom to your younger self prior to you starting your business, what would you say?
That's not enough time. um,
That's all you've got.
it's all I've got. No. As it relates to business,
Yeah, I was going to ask you a similar question after this about like family and stuff. So yeah,
okay,
as it relates to
okay,
business,
yeah, because I was going to sort of tie the two of them together, and maybe I could do that. Just
if you want to tie the two of them together, I guess we could extend it to 2 minutes.
okay,
But
fair enough.
you
Um,
go.
I think it's understanding why you're doing the business in the first place, and don't lose sight of that. There's going to be seasons where, because most of the people I talk to, they started their business for one of two reasons: they wanted more money or more time or both. And I think, looking back, if I had to talk to my younger self, that there's going to be seasons where you want to be spending more time with your family, but you need to put in hours in the business so you can spend months of time with your family later. So, but on the flip side of that, depending on how old your children are, that can be a challenge to make that decision. So,
Mm,
fortunately, I think looking back for me, when we were building our business, my kids were pretty young, and we were fortunate to, like, during the summer months when we were busy, I was I was busy and I was not at the house like during the day when they were home from school. But during the winter months, I was home a lot. I was at all their sporting events. I would pick them up from school. I would drop them off in the morning. Like, I had the opportunity there. So I think just understanding that there's seasons, but don't lose sight of why you started the business. Because if more time was one of the reasons, don't make it all about the money. Make sure you do actually get that time that you can spend with your family.
that's awesome. And What about as it pertains to uh, on the family front? What advice would you give to yourself in regards to entering into marriage, before having kids versus after having kids, and then perhaps after having had them, when you want them to actually listen to you?
um, I got a funny story about having kids listen. So when so here's the thing, right? Like if you're a parent, if you have kids and they've you've ever experienced a time when like things were just a racket and people were yelling, screaming, all that, it's getting somebody's attention in that moment is like you need a pattern
Mhm.
interrupt to get everybody to be like, what the heck? What? So
Everything is
I use
marketing.
this Yes, I used that tactic. One time, probably my kids were probably, I don't know, 10, 12, 8, 10, somewhere in that range. And we were out to eat at a restaurant and they were just at each other, back and forth, back and forth. You know, one was stealing the crayons from the other and it was just this and that. And they started throwing the crayons at each other at the dinner table out at a restaurant. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're disrupting everybody else around us. This is driving me nuts. So I finally stopped and I said, look, girls, the only thing we throw at the table is knives. And they stopped and they were like, did dad just say we throw knives at each other at the dinner table? And like, it was like, they both stopped in the moment and looked at me. And, but it, mission accomplished, right? They stopped. And now it's a joke. It's a running joke that every time we're out to dinner and there's a steak knife or something on the table, one of them's like, hey dad, what do we only throw at the table? Knives. That's right. So it's just been this running joke. And then to sort of pile onto it now, years after that initial instance, we're out to eat it was for my wife's birthday. We went to this really nice steakhouse and we're seated at this table that's up on this loft area, like an elevated loft, and our seats are right on the edge of it, and there's a railing around the edge, and it goes down to like the main entrance of the restaurant. And we're sitting there. The waitress comes around and sets the steak knives on the table. My daughter went to get her napkin off the table and like bumped the steak knife, and it fell on the ground and was literally teetering on the edge of the balcony, sharp side out, with people below us. It was terrifying. Like I looked at him like, nobody move. Nobody move. And thankfully I had a steady enough hand to reach down and pick that knife up without it falling and impaling somebody. But it was just a continuation of we only throw knives at the table. Thankfully we were able to laugh at it, but my daughter was pretty nervous and like terrified that could have ended very
Yeah.
poorly. Yeah, the pattern interrupts with kids. It's fun, and
What I think
try
is
it
what I think
sometime.
is really interesting about that story is that because where I thought you were going with that as you're explaining it, I thought you were going to like brandish the knife, like you've stood up with this knife, and that was the pattern interrupt. But you've just said it, and it's funny that if you had have said a normal thing, they wouldn't have stopped. And it's like the classic, you're trying to get the kids to listen to something, and they're just not even with it, not even hearing you. But as soon as you try and have like an adult conversation, they're just like, oh, what was that? Who?
Yeah, yeah,
So
right,
the
right.
selective hearing, it's like they're attuned. They're just waiting for the pattern interrupt. It's like, wait, you're no longer saying normal things, or you're not talking to us. We better pay rapt attention. Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Any final closing thoughts from your end, John?
Oh, I don't think so. We covered a lot of
Yeah,
ground,
it's been
and
awesome.
this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks very much for taking the time to jump on.
I appreciate getting to tell my story.
Are you picking up what I'm laying down? Are you sniffing what I'm stepping in? If you're looking for a really valuable community centered around building your business, being really intentional with your spouse and kids, and if you think you can tolerate my terrible dad jokes, then join Family Oriented Business Growers. It's awesome. There's self-paced challenges designed to help you solve key pain points within your business in short, intentional sprints. There's awesome people in there doing awesome things who have experience with stuff that can help you, having stood where you stand. You'll benefit from what's in there, we'll benefit from having you in there, you legend you, and best of all, it's totally free and also free of toxic shenanigans because we don't tolerate none of that. The mission of the group is to help 250 family-oriented home service business owners reclaim 5 hours per week for what matters most whilst growing their business this year. So jump in there and get amongst it. Join via warplan.au, that's warplan.au. Oh no. He's early. Warplan.au, catch you in there. Ah!